You open your fridge, there's a yogurt cup sitting right there. Looks completely fine, smells completely fine. Then you spot the date stamped on the lid, expired yesterday, and just like that, your brain fires off a 5-alarm panic. Is this dangerous? Should I eat it? What if I get sick? You toss it. Move on. Feels responsible. For most of human history, nobody needed a date stamped on their food. Before the 20th century, people didn't read labels to know if food was safe. They used something far more reliable, their senses. Milk that had turned smelled sour before you even opened it. Bread grew mold, you could see. Meat changed color and texture when it was going bad. Humans evolved alongside food spoilage, and our senses evolved to detect it. The shift happened when industrial food production changed everything. Suddenly, a loaf of bread wasn't baked by someone down the street. It was produced in a factory 3 states away, shipped in refrigerated trucks, and stacked on a supermarket shelf among hundreds of other products. The personal relationship between food and consumer disappeared. In its place came packaging, preservatives, and eventually, dates. The first formal push for date labeling in the United States came in the 1970s, driven by consumer advocacy groups who wanted more transparency about freshness. But here's the critical part that most people never learn. The federal government never standardized what those dates mean. With the exception of infant formula, there is no federal law in the United States requiring expiration dates on food. What exists instead is a patchwork of state laws, industry self-regulation, and manufacturer decisions, all using different language to mean different things. Best before, use by, and sell by are 3 entirely different things, and people mix them up constantly. This is where the confusion gets serious. When most people see any date on food packaging, they interpret it as a hard deadline, the moment food crosses from safe to unsafe. But the language on the label tells a completely different story, if you know how to read it. Best before or best by is a quality marker. It tells you when the manufacturer believes the product will still be at its peak flavor, texture, and appearance. After that date, a bag of chips might be slightly stale. Peanut butter might taste a little less fresh, but it hasn't become dangerous. The food hasn't transformed. According to the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service, most Best By dates have nothing to do with safety. They reflect the manufacturer's quality standard, not a biological tipping point. Use By is a different category entirely, and this is the one that actually matters from a food safety standpoint. You'll see this on fresh meat, fresh fish, and some dairy products. These are genuinely perishable. After the use by date, harmful bacterial growth becomes a real concern. This is the date worth respecting. Not because the food turns dangerous at midnight, but because the margin for error on highly perishable proteins is narrow enough that conservative behavior makes sense. Sell by is arguably the most misunderstood of all, because it was never meant for consumers at all. It's a retailer instruction. It tells the store how long to display the product on the shelf, leaving room for the consumer to store it at home for additional days. When you see sell by and the date has passed, the store may have already pulled that product, but it was still intended to be eaten after that point. The problem is that manufacturers don't always use these terms consistently. Some companies stamp best by on products where use by would be more accurate. Others use sell by interchangeably with best before. Without federal standardization of the terminology, the consumer is left guessing. The companies setting those dates have a financial interest in being conservative. Here's the business reality behind expiration dates. When a manufacturer sets a date on their product, they're making a calculated decision. If they set the date too far out and someone gets sick, even from improper storage that had nothing to do with the product, they face liability, recalls, and reputational damage. If they set the date too close to production, food gets thrown away, customers buy the product more frequently, and the company is never blamed for spoilage. The incentive structure points in one direction: conservative dates. This is why the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, in a landmark 2013 report co-authored with the Natural Resources Defense Council, concluded that the current date labeling system contributes massively to consumer food waste, and that most products remain safe and high quality well beyond whatever date is printed on the label. Canned goods are the clearest example. The USDA states that commercially canned foods have a shelf life of at least 2 years from the date of processing. After that, they don't become dangerous. They may slowly lose nutritional value, color, or texture, but the can itself, if undamaged and stored properly, continues to protect the food from bacterial contamination indefinitely. Archaeologists have opened cans from the 1800s and found the contents still technically edible, though honestly, no one's lining up to test that theory. Frozen foods operate on a similar principle. Freezing doesn't kill bacteria. It suspends their activity. Properly frozen meat doesn't expire the way fresh meat does. The quality may decline after months in the freezer, but a chicken breast that's been frozen for a year is not a health hazard. It's just drier and less flavorful than it was in month 1. Your senses are still the most accurate expiration system ever developed. None of this means you should ignore dates entirely or take unnecessary risks. What it means is that dates are one input among several. And for most foods, your senses will give you more reliable information than a number printed 6 months ago in a factory. Smell is the first and most powerful test. Most food that is genuinely spoiled will tell you before you eat it. Bacterial decomposition produces compounds that trigger a specific, unmistakable odor response. Texture matters too. Sliminess on meat or fish is a bacterial signal, regardless of what date is on the package. Visual cues like mold, discoloration, and separation give you real-time information that a date printed at manufacture cannot. The foods where you should trust the label over your senses are the exceptions, not the rule. Raw poultry and ground meat can carry dangerous pathogens like Salmonella and E. coli at concentrations that don't always produce obvious odors. Soft cheeses and unpasteurized dairy can harbor listeria. For these specific categories, conservative behavior and attention to the use-by date is genuinely warranted. For everything else, dry goods, condiments, canned foods, hard cheeses, most packaged snacks, frozen items, the date is a quality benchmark set by a company protecting its reputation. Use it as a starting point, not a final verdict. The movement to fix this system is real, and it's gaining ground. In 2017, the Consumer Goods Forum, a global industry coalition, recommended that manufacturers voluntarily standardize their language to just 2 phrases, best if used by for quality and use by for safety. A growing number of major food companies adopted this guidance. In 2023, the USDA announced steps toward more consistent federal guidance on date labeling, pushing to clarify terminology and reduce unnecessary food waste. Multiple states have also moved to modernize their date labeling laws in recent years, recognizing that the current system costs consumers money and contributes to a global food waste problem that has serious environmental consequences. When food goes to landfill, it decomposes and produces methane, a greenhouse gas significantly more potent than carbon dioxide in the short term. The connection between expiration date confusion and climate impact is not theoretical, it's measurable. Understanding what these labels actually mean is, in a small but real way, part of a larger story about how we use resources. The next time you're standing at your fridge holding something that expired 2 days ago, you have the information to make an actual decision instead of a panic-driven one. Best before tells you about quality, not safety. Use by is the one that matters for high-risk perishables. Sell by was never written for you at all. The companies setting those dates are being conservative by design, and for most shelf-stable, frozen, and dry foods, the margin between the printed date and the actual end of the food's safe life is wider than you've been led to believe. Trust the date as a guide. Trust your senses as a check. Know which foods actually carry real risk, and treat those with more care. That's not reckless, that's informed. If this changed how you think about something you interact with every single day, share this video with someone who could use it. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet. This channel is built for people who want real answers to the questions nobody thinks to ask. And leave a comment below. What's the expired food you've eaten that turned out to be perfectly fine? I want to know. See you in the next one.